scheduling conference in the formal complaint of SRR Partners LLC, DBA Sorrel River Ranch Resort and Spa against Frontier Communications. It's Commission docket number 19-041-01. My name is Michael Hammer and I'm the Commission's designated presiding officer for the docket. Let's go ahead and make introductions, beginning to my right, please.
I'm Allison Anderson with the Office of Consumer Services.
Steve Meekin representing Sorrel River Ranch.
Chris Parker from the Division of Public Utilities.
Mark Long from DPU.
Bill Duncan, Division of Public Utilities.
Melissa Pascal, PSC.
And we have some people on the phone.
Yes, David Ciani with Sorrel River Ranch.
Is there anyone else?
Yeah, Mark Jeffries with Frontier Communications.
Mike Giles with Frontier Communications. Your Honor, it's George Thompson with Frontier.
And it's Carl Earhart with Frontier.
Who?
Carlos Cardona, Frontier.
Jose Barrios, Frontier.
One more time, please.
Jose Barrios with Frontier.
You spell that?
I'm sorry, do you mind spelling your name?
Jose.
Is that your last name?
Oh, B as in Bob, ARRIOS.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Anyone else? All right. Well, we scheduled this. We'll begin with the technical conference, which we scheduled at the request of the parties. I assumed the company would have a presentation or information they wanted to deliver. Is Frontier prepared to do that?
Your Honor, George Thompson. Yes, we can deliver a short overview of what's happened, let's say, in the last 8 or 9 months with the network that serves, among other folks, Sorrel River Ranch. I've got a number of folks here with me today. Mark Jeffries is our senior operational executive in Utah. Mike Giles is our local manager for operations in and around, among other places, the OAB location. Carlos and Jose are network engineers for Frontier, and Carl Earhart is our Vice President for Regulatory and External Affairs, who covers, among other states, Utah. And I'll defer now to the Frontier person with the most knowledge about the timeline and some of the local history on this network. It's Mike Giles from Frontier. I'll ask Mike to give us an overview of what's going on since November, December timeframe of 2018 and bring us up to the present.
Thanks, George. So on December 18th, 2018, a new radio network was placed to upgrade facilities as part of a CAP 2 project to the Castle Valley area that serves Castle Valley, Professor Valley, and Castleton. This required a new Cambian 820 radio in our Moab office, Bald Mesa repeater site up on the mountain, as well as our remote office in Castle Valley. Cut over to that new radio, went over the allotted time by several hours, but eventually the service was restored and the new radio is in place. Within a few days after that, we started having service complaints of customers losing calls and extended internet outages lasting from a few seconds to hours, very intermittently, not consistent to other issues, but nonetheless, that's when the problem started. Troubleshooting started because it was a new radio. We relied heavily on vendors, Cambian, Nokia, and the installer, as well as our own internal resources. Access to the radio site, as many of you know, Bald Mesa, proved to be problematic at times during those first few months because of access and due to a heavy snow and weather that we hadn't had in that area in several years. Through the holidays, we had continued service results, but the radio was back up and down several times. On January 3rd, after the holidays, we began formal calls to work through the issues with the vendors as well as our internal resources. Made several tweaks to the radio system at that time, dealt with access to Bald Mesa, as well as getting stuck on a couple of occasions. I had to dig out and bring techs back because of safety reasons. Made several tweaks to the radio. It would be okay for a week, a few days, and then we'd start having continued drop calls. This went on through about the middle of February. The determination was that the new radio was not providing the service that we needed. We've made several tweaks on it, and the decision was made to replace that radio with a new vendor, and that process began on, I would say, towards the end of February, and March 20th, we cut over to the new radio. It's an Aviat radio between Bald Mesa and Moab. We continued to see no issues from Bald Mesa down into Castle Valley, so that radio remained in place. That radio was changed out on March 20th, and stability of the radio at that time seemed to be stable for the customers, the regular residential and business customers in the Castle Valley area. However, we had continued issues with Sorrel River Ranch's PRI circuit to their location. We've done various tests in the meantime, made a few modifications to the overall system, and did some monitoring at the site to make sure that the problems didn't exist in our network. We've worked a little bit with Sorrel River's CPE contractor out of St. George, and Mitch has made several visits out on site to try to isolate the trouble to make sure it isn't in their equipment. That continues to go on at this point in time. So that's an overall, high-level version of where we've been in the last 4 months.
All right, Mr. Thompson, is there additional information the company would like to present? And I'm happy to allow the parties to ask questions. Of course, this isn't a deposition or even a hearing. The idea is that this serves the function of an informal exchange of information so the parties can determine how best to proceed. Before I see if there are any questions, do you have anything else to add?
I don't think we have anything else at this point, Your Honor.
Mr. Miko?
So is it Frontier's position that the problem is in the customer's equipment?
The answer is we don't know. We have attempted on several occasions to have the vendor for the customer's CPE assist us with testing when we show that the circuit is good up to the network interface device at the ranch. But so far, we haven't had anyone on site on the Sorrel River side to assist in testing the inside wiring and or the CPE. So the answer to the question is we don't know.
When will you know? I mean, how is that going to be addressed?
we've offered several times to have an on-site meeting with our technicians, and haven't heard anything back from the ranch as to whether or not they're open to that kind of a meeting and an on-site visit. So we'll renew that offer at this point.
Dave, you're on the line. What has been your experience? I mean, so.
Well, I'll tell you that I have met with a technician who's visited property several times. I've provided them with our phone IT professional's contact phone number and email address. I have never been contacted by Frontier asking for a meeting and not responded. And it seems somewhat ridiculous to assume that the problem is within our internal phone system, because we're not the only people being affected. And I can tell you that last night we dropped calls consistently for about an hour, and I'm sure that Frontier can attest to their having issues last night.
Are you aware, I mean, you dropped calls, and you're saying that there were calls dropped across the valley? Or do you know that?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked to other neighbors, to Red Cliff Lodge, to people living in Castle Valley. We have people who work here who live in the valley. And so, you know, the issues that we're having, they're not isolated to our property. The notion that Frontier has made attempts to meet with us to resolve it is not true. And the notion that the problem may be internally within our phone system is in my opinion, laughable from my experiences being here for the last 2 years and communicating with Frontier and using the phones regularly.
All right, folks, I don't want to get into the merits of this case. We will ultimately, if things proceed, have a hearing and everyone will have an opportunity to testify. The idea here is, I think, for the complainants and the DPU to have some understanding of what the problem actually is on a technical basis and how it might be resolved. Is that right?
Well, yeah, but I mean, the reason that what he said was important to me anyway is that, I mean, Frontier finished their presentation with, it comes down to customer premise equipment, but it seems broader than that, so it isn't that it's happening on the ranch, it's happening across the valley. All I want to try to figure out is, I mean, okay, you changed out the radio, but what do we do to try to ensure that that they get the service they've got to have?
Mr. Thompson, what is Frontier's plan in terms of remediation at this point? What are the next steps?
Well, we'd like to meet with the complainant at their location and see if we can diagnose anything on their side of the NIT as our next step in isolating the trouble.
Well,
So last night you guys had no record of any issues with your incoming service?
No, that's not what I said.
Well, did you have issues last night?
Mike, can you talk to that?
Yeah, there were some hits last night at 10 p.m., 2 a.m., and 10 a.m. this morning, somewhere in the network. We just don't know the impact of that.
Yeah, I mean,
You guys have lots of Dave. I have this question to Dave, maybe. Lots of lightning in the area down there. From what I understand, you had quite a weather issue last night, up and beyond. That's the part that makes it a little bit difficult at this point. Is you've got the normal factors that come into play, but because of the lack of consistency through the month, from December on, I think everything that happens is pointed, well, it must be that same issue, where there are other factors that are involved in this normal service issues that we have from time to time. So, that's the difficult part. I talk to several customers. I have customers that call me every time it goes out. During that time frame, I'm in coordination with communication with the mayor of that area, and yes, there have been issues in the past, but since the 20th of March, that traffic has settled down and haven't received the complaints, with the exception of what you experienced. Even talking to Red Cliffs, the only thing they mentioned was the outage on the 20th, the extended outage while we changed the radio out. My subsequent calls to them have not produced any issues and seems to be more stable, as well as the customer base. And I don't talk to every customer in Castle Valley, but I have those that let me know every time it's out. So, and I have not heard from them at all. So,
can we get, you obviously have computer systems, can we get a report
Who's speaking?
for your service to our area over the last 12 months? Every outage that you have. You obviously have software that can track that.
I don't know if that's possible, and I don't know how long we would keep the records. But Mike, can you check that?
Yeah, I'm making a note now.
And by this is Bill Duncan at DPU, by those records, are we talking about customer reported troubles, or are we talking about troubles generated by the radio system that notify some operations center that there's a problem in the system? I would think you would have both, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I mean, not specifically to the radio, but outages large enough that they would create a major service interruption. Obviously, those would be included. But even during this time when we knew there were problems, it doesn't always generate a major service interruption because of the intermittency of this particular issue. So, but I made a note to look into the trouble ticket history and the major service interruptions over the past 12 months.
I'd really rather you didn't, it's not a matter of major service interruptions. When a call drops, as you said, one of you said earlier in the call, it could drop for a second. Well, that drops the phone call. And that's a problem. What level of service am I supposed to expect from you?
I'm not sure that's a question that's appropriate for this particular venue. It's certainly a legitimate question, and I don't fault you for asking it, but I don't think it's the kind of question that we're looking to answer at this technical conference. If there really isn't any additional information to be exchanged at this point, perhaps it's better to go ahead and proceed.
Can I just ask one question?
Of course.
Can you just give me an overview of how service gets to the residents of Castle Valley? I assume that the radio covers two legs. It's just there's just two legs to that radio system, and then it goes to some type of a line concentrator located in Castle Valley. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then,
so the main office, I'll give you a quick overview of it.
Thank you.
The main central office is in Moab. The calls or the equipment resides there. It's a microwave radio shot up to Bald Mesa, repeater location. Then it hits a passive repeater above the town of Castle Valley on the mountain there, and shoots down to our remote central office in Castle Valley. From that standpoint, it is copper facilities to the residents of Castle Valley, as well as copper facilities over to Professor Valley, where Sorrel River is located.
And so it's all, there's no fiber in the distribution inside of Castle Valley?
There is not to serve this customer. There is fiber optic from the office down through Castle Valley to a concentrator that provides high-speed internet.
Okay.
But no, there's no fiber to this location, no.
So do you know how many feet of copper it is from the last fiber location out to the ranch? Just a wild guess?
5 miles, is that, Dave? Maybe you could answer that better. 5 miles roughly?
Roughly, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, more or less 5 miles. I'm trying to think, a couple miles out to the highway and then 2 or 3 miles
up.
Yeah. So, I would say roughly 5 miles.
Okay. But it's an actual remote switch in Castle Valley?
Yes. It's a remote switch off the Moab office.
Off the Moab, yeah. Okay.
Correct.
Okay, I've got a pretty good picture of what's going on.
Okay, and what does that mean to you?
That means that I just have a picture of how the area is served. 3 legs of a radio, some fiber in the distribution, followed by copper. That's all I have.
As we talk strictly about Sorrel, there's no fiber involved in that. So you
Right.
get back to Moab. Correct.
And prior to December 18th, 2018, the service was generally adequate?
I'd have to, Liz or Dave, what was the service like before December 18th?
Oh, guys, I guess that's why Liz's question is relevant, is what is considered adequate and reliable service? We before that point, we were still having issues, and we routinely dropped calls. That was why they changed the microwave out in the first place.
But then certainly more severe after December 18th.
It was excessive to the points where we had no phones for days and multiple hours at a time. Leading up to that point, it would just be normal to drop calls routinely, which is, again, still. Yesterday there wasn't a significant lightning storm. It rained, and we dropped calls for a couple hours consecutively. If that's adequate and reliable service, and that's what we should expect to be provided, then yes, it was normal before that date. But we've been having issues for many years, and it hasn't been reliable, and in my opinion, it's not adequate.
May I ask, how old was the radio that was replaced in December? When was the last time that was replaced, before December of 2018?
I don't have the exact date, Liz. I would say 6, 7 years.
And have there been any substantial improvements to your infrastructure to us in the past 5 years?
From a capacity standpoint, yes. As far as what we could provide for you for internet, yes. Didn't change the voice side of it too much. These radios were added to increase the bandwidth for internet coverage out there, as much as anything. That was the gist of the replacement, to get the new, more updated and more additional bandwidth to serve that area.
This is Chris Parker from the division. I wonder, and I don't want to get into confidential information, but are you generally in the practice of having a regular replacement program for infrastructure, or are you waiting till stuff breaks, or what's the practice for this part of your territory?
Hey, this is Mark Jeffries. I can answer that. We will look at radio equipment, and I have about 100 of these towers across the 5 states that I oversee. As it needs to be upgraded due to manufacturer discontinued, or if we're upgrading on bandwidth. In the given case here, it was an upgrade for bandwidth as to why we were inputting or putting a new radio into place. But we do serve many, many areas with microwave radios that are hard to reach, just as this one is.
Is it fair to say that the past practices are your future plan for conducting business as well?
It really depends on the area. If it's economically feasible to place a fiber feed to a given area, we would definitely do that. If it's cost prohibitive, then we would look at other alternatives like microwave, which we currently do today.
And
in fact, in some areas now we do fixed wireless as well with it.
Do you intend to, at some point in the near future, make use of the state's Universal Service Fund to help provide service in those high-cost areas?
You know, that I would leave that up to Carl, and maybe he could answer that better than me. Our role in the operations side is to maintain networks and to manage all of the technicians. Carl, do you have any visibility to that?
No, a couple of thoughts though. I think it's an issue we ought to talk about. My understanding is Frontier hasn't been eligible to receive money from the State Universal Service Fund, but you know, maybe that is a potential source of funding to look at for certain infrastructure.
Yeah, I mean, it hasn't been eligible because it depends on levels of rate base and investment, but it's designed to encourage providing service to areas like this.
Right. So certainly, I guess open to having discussions around how the Universal Service Fund could be used to help in some of the remote areas like Castle Valley, where you know it's very expensive for the backhaul.
Well, coming back to the remediation issue then, I asked the question once, but I'll ask again. Does Frontier have any specific remediation plan or timeline that they can give to affected customers? I understand you're not specifically aware of what the problem is, but what is the timeline for investigating?
Well, we continue to investigate daily. As we offered earlier in the call, we'd still like to make a site visit in conjunction with the complainant's vendor and see if we can isolate trouble there.
Well, Dave, Liz, I mean, when are you ready to receive technicians there to investigate?
As I said, I've had a technician visit about 7 times in the last 3 months, and I've provided them with all of the information, and we're happy at any time. I don't believe that anyone has contacted us and asked to set up a meeting on site.
And there's been plenty of opportunity for them to do it. We call them all the time. We would welcome it, so as soon as possible.
Is Dave still your vendor out of St. George then, Dave, or not?
Yep.
Yep.
I know Mitch has had conversations with him the last 2 weeks. He wasn't even aware of this.
Oh, yes, he was. I spoke to him.
Okay.
Completely incorrect. And I asked him if and he, not only did I ask him, we had stopped our call software because I wanted to know if his system could report on your outages. And we would have had to So he absolutely was aware of it.
Okay.
So maybe you could schedule right now when that visit's going to occur in the next couple of days.
We're available anytime. Mitch is available to go out there and meet him anytime. The complexity of it is intermittent, so you can sit out there for a couple days and not get anything, and then have 3 or 4 bursts. So,
But you know, the only time we have outages is when there's an outage from Frontier, like last night, which you said again. You know, that's why it's laughable to me that we're going down this path of trying to investigate our internal phone system. I'm happy for you to investigate it, but it seems very obvious where the source of the challenges are coming from. When you guys don't have any problems, we don't have any problems.
well, what we're attempting to do is turn over every stone, Dave, and even when you were calling in saying there were dropped calls, we had nothing on our test gear to indicate any drop of any sort. So that's when we started to say, you know, this problem may have masked problems that you've had in the past because of our issues. We're not denying there were issues. We're just saying we didn't even attempt to say maybe there's something that's corrupting that PRI from your side of it until we got more stable, and then you guys were still having dropped calls. At that point in time, we said maybe we need to take a look at your network or your equipment as well. So that's what kicked that off. Not to say that there aren't or haven't been issues, just to say let's peel it back one more layer now and make sure that our problems haven't been masking issues there. And because the lack of reports that I've got from other customers when our system was acting up, those calls would flood in. Now it appears to be isolated to, you know, if there isn't an outage, isolated to you guys calling saying, hey, we had dropped calls. So that's why that even came up, not as a way to deflect issues or anything like that, but because you were still saying you have dropped calls, the rest of the valley, we're not getting those complaints. So let's peel it back one more layer. We will continue to do that regardless of these hearings or anything like that. We'll continue to look at it. So,
Well, I mean, I'm a little short on ideas other than having a meeting there on site to see what you can discover there. And then, frankly, I mean, in a normal complaint case, it's kind of a little less dramatic than a normal case before the commission. Maybe we ought to set a hearing date that provides a little incentive to move things along, and by that, you know, hopefully by then it'll be resolved and we can settle it and be done. But rather than just walk away saying we'll come back and schedule, let's schedule a hearing date. And you know, if there needs to be additional filings between, I mean, but I would say expedited so that this would happen in the next few weeks, if not sooner, to keep this moving.
That was consistent with our attention. We noticed this in the scheduling conference as well.
Right.
So, do you all want to meet and confer outside the absence of the commission absent about that schedule, or should we just get it done now?
I'm fine with just moving ahead. I mean, but I would start, you know, Dave, I mean, I let's give them a chance to come take another look and see if there isn't something more that can be done, whether it's your customer premise equipment or whatever.
Of course.
And see if we can't get it tacked down, and hopefully we can get it resolved. And meanwhile, we set something out a couple of weeks or whatever the schedule allows, and to keep motivation moving. I can't think of anything else, unless somebody on the phone has a better idea.
I like your idea.
I think it makes sense to suspend the technical conference portion if there's nothing additional to be gleaned, and we'll just move on to addressing the schedule. We can stop the streaming now. Wow.